Rhinelander podcast is sponsored by AirPro Fan and Blower Company. For more information, visit airprofan.com. Welcome to the inaugural Real Rhinelander podcast. I would like to welcome Geoff Weller today, our guest, our first guest. I'm so excited that you are willing to come on and talk to us. But we are launching this new podcast, Real Rhinelander, and we're talking to real people in our community, professionals, entrepreneurs, community leaders, talking about, the behind the scenes of Rhinelander, and having real, authentic conversations. So Geoff has graciously agreed to be our first guest. And part of the reason why I asked him to be our first guest is that I wanted to flip the script. Usually you are on the interview side.
You have me out of my comfort zone.
And so we have some questions that we're going to talk through. But first, I was just hoping if you could give us a little introduction. I mean, obviously a lot of people know who you are, but.
Yeah, so I am, in November, my 10th year here in Rhinelander.
Ooh.
So I know 10 years already. And, it's interesting. My journey here is a complex one because out of college, I chased the money and got into a career that wasn't meteorology. But there was always something missing. There was always that voice in the back of my head saying, you know what, you only live once. You got to get through this and just go for your goals, right? So I gave, my employer a year's notice. I stayed an extra 3 months past that. And then I went back and did an internship in Green Bay and then I applied for 4 positions and here I am, right? But what took me here was, it was absolutely the fact that my parents, and growing up, I have a lake house in Amherst, which is far southern viewing area of our viewing area, right? Not really the Northwoods, but it really introduced me to Wisconsin, because I spent my summers up here. And I knew the weather up here because I knew since I was 3 years old that I wanted to be a meteorologist, right? So when I'm here every summer, I was studying the weather. So that brought me to Rhinelander, right? So 10 years ago, I applied for a position here and they said yes. And then now I'm here and it's been 10 years later. I'm having a great time.
And so your current role is Chief Meteorologist and News Director.
Yes. So about 4 years ago now, I took on the responsibility of News Director. So that is a whole job in itself. It really is. Two people could do that job, right? So the balance for me has been a struggle, only because weather is still happening, right? I still have the main meteorology position that I'm in, and that doesn't ever sleep. It's always on in my head, right? But the News Director position came about 4 years ago now. And I'd always been kind of a current events guy. I always knew news. I won every competition in grade school and high school about current events, right? So news has always interested me. I didn't necessarily know all the ins and outs of journalism. I've had to kind of learn that on a crash cycle. And there's times where I've made mistakes and errors, but you learn from those pretty quickly. And it's been a balance now to balance the news director role with the meteorology role. So it's been fun.
Very cool. Yeah. You have spoken to our leadership class the last few years, and it's just been so great to tour and learn about your background and everything like that. I was wondering if you'd share kind of your Cheesecake Factory background a little bit.
Yeah. So,
I just think it's so fun.
So I knew, like I said, when I was 3, I wanted to be a meteorologist. I was that kid that went on vacation in Florida with the family, who I would spend the day indoors watching the Weather Channel versus outdoors on the beach. So I knew, and my parents knew, my sister knew when I was 3, you know what I mean? Like, what's wrong with them, right? But then, so I went to college for meteorology, and I got into OU. In OU, Oklahoma, it's the best meteorology school in the country, the best research meteorology school in the country. And I was a kid in a candy store because here I was going to school throughout the day, right? Studying meteorology. My dream was coming true. And then at night, I picked up an internship at Fox News in Oklahoma City, right? And literally my job was, I would go in and we would look at the weather forecast. They would hand me the keys to a satellite truck and say, go out and find a tornado.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, it didn't happen on most days, but I was just having a blast looking for them,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
And that was my day in and out, for weeks and then months, and turned into 2 years of that. So that was just like I was in heaven, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also got into restaurants. When I was in Oklahoma, I wanted to work a full-time job while going to school. I remember a semester I took 18 credit hours and a full-time job.
Wow.
I thought I was going to pass out. Like, it
Yeah.
was just like I've always been that guy that take on more, take on more, take on more. But I found then what my limit was, right? Because then the grades start to suffer and then something has to give.
Mm-hmm.
I started not being good at both things. And so I knew I ended up dropping 6 credit hours that semester. But it was one of those, I knew I've always been that go-getter. And then at that moment, I'm like, okay, I have limits too, right? I learned that. But out of college, I was working in restaurants, doing well, quickly promoted up to manager and then general manager. And then, when you're 22 years old and someone offers you a lot of money to stay and do, what you're loving doing at that moment, I took it.
Mm-hmm.
And that turned into about a 9-year journey for me.
Wow.
And then ended up with the Cheesecake Factory. And I was kind of a traveling, I don't know. I would go into restaurants and just support them, kind of uplift them, help fix problems that were wrong, and then move on to the next city. And I did that for 8 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, I got to live everywhere though. Like, I
Yeah.
think I lived in 18 cities in 11 years.
Wow.
So what that also taught me though is you find out where you feel the most comfortable, right? So like living in Las Vegas, okay, that wasn't for me. Living in Boca Raton, Florida, that wasn't for me. Living in St. Louis, that wasn't for me. There's something about Wisconsin, kind of the farm raised, potato eating, corn fed mentality that's here that is just, it feels like home.
Yeah.
So that's part of my journey back to Wisconsin, was I knew what felt like home, right? So yes, along the way, I have been, offered positions in bigger cities, and it always comes as a compliment to be like, thank you for looking at my skills and realizing that I could be successful here.
Right.
But I don't want that.
Yeah.
I don't want that. I want to live in a community that accepts me, who I can have an impact on, who I can help develop in a way. And then that feels comfortable. And I found it here in Rhinelander.
I love that.
And it's here. It's here. And it's there's no looking back, and I feel like that. So 10 years ago now, I gave Cheesecake Factory a year's notice. Went back and took an internship in Green Bay. And then now I'm here with this job. And then since that job I took it, I've been promoted up to, news director and then chief meteorologist. So the titles are one thing, but of course the work is another.
Yeah. I just love that story so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So one of the things that we want to talk about too is how, the business professional community, how their organizations impact the community as well. And so obviously you work for WJFW, and how do you see the work that you guys do at that organization and how it can impact a community directly?
It is direct. It's direct, and it's in real time sometimes, right? And I feel that pressure. I feel that pressure to get it right. My biggest fear is being shallow in a way of not expecting enough out of my team members to tell the Northwoods stories with the depth that it should be, right? Because you can watch our newscasts and you realize that they're different from our competition. They're different from the bigger city newscasts. I want people to vacation up here from Minneapolis, Chicago, wherever it is, and come here and think, oh, the news is different. The news can be good. If you watch our A block, the first 10 minutes of our show, we'll largely focus the first 5-6 stories on great people doing great things in this community. I know that helps shape a community, right? It creates an aura. It creates a place of belonging. It creates a place of, I want to live there, right? And I see our ratings. I see how many people watch our shows from Oneida County and Vilas County and Forest County. And there's a lot of people watching. So I feel that impact right away in terms of getting it right, but also showcasing people doing great stuff. And there's a lot of them. And especially the older community we have here, they're very involved with the community. And they have a vigor that's stronger than some millennials these years, this time, So they're making it happen, kind of post, retirement kind of thing.
Yeah.
And bringing those stories to life is just fun for me.
Yeah, for
And then
sure.
to air those things and have the reaction come back the way it is, it's a lot of fun for me, and I have that control, and I know I have that control, and that responsibility isn't lightly on me. I think about it every day of how we're going to present this. Now, there's other times too where, we have to report on, the not so great things, and I sit in my office and contemplate things, and we'll have to report on stories of, say, advertisers that we've been, friends with for decades, but sometimes bad things happen, right? And the job is to get it fair, to be fair, and lay it out there the way it is, accurate and fair, and then move on, right? But I feel that pressure, but largely my job is to help shape the community by telling the great stories within the community.
Yeah. I love that. I also think that it would be super interesting for people to know that you guys do something unique. It's unique to have a news station like this in a community our size, but also your connection to Maine. Can you tell?
Isn't it interesting?
Yeah.
Okay, so in real life, everything you see me do here in the Rhinelander area, we also do for our sister station over in Bangor, Maine. So it's an ABC, it's an ABC and Fox affiliate, and they're an hour ahead of us. So in reality, their programs are airing the same times ours are. So we can't have it be live. So we recorded about an hour or two ahead of time, right? And we have full-blown weather forecasts for them. Yeah. And I'm telling you, it is one of those things where, as a meteorologist, a team of 3 or 4 of us, I have an intern right now, if there is a strong storm in Maine and we're getting severe weather here, my brain starts to go haywire. It really is one of those things where keeping everything separate, right, it's interesting to me. But about, let's see, when I took over this job, our TV station in Maine it's our sister station. So our owner, who owns WJFW, also owns this TV station in Maine. That's his only 2 stations that he owns. So we're not part of a big kind of corporate structure. It's us talking with Joe, our owner, on things. So when I took over this job, Maine was using a company called AccuWeather to do their daily weather forecast. Well, AccuWeather decided to get out of the weather forecasting business for TV stations, right? So they jacked up their rates real high and said, we want you guys basically to go away, right? And there weren't a lot of us left. So my boss came to me, our owner came to me and said, do you think you want to do this? Can you handle it? Is it something even on the radar in terms of being successful at both? And the answer was, let's go for it. Let's go for it. And we did. And it's a lot. And the funny thing is, the validation came that same year. I was nominated for an award in Maine, but nobody knew that we weren't in Maine. So it's one of those, like, do we tell them? You know what I mean? Because we kind of play it off with the anchors. Like, I know who the anchors are that day. And it's like, oh, thanks, Kevin, or thanks, Beth, and we kind of played off like we're in studio with them, kind of doing the weather forecast. So as to not give people the impression that, oh, we were forecasters far away, when in reality, okay, yeah, we're 1,500 miles away, but we can still forecast the weather there just as accurately as somebody in your backyard. So yes, the balance is real with the meteorology end of forecasting for 2 very different markets.
Right.
And then when there's a nor'easter coming through Maine and the winds are 80 miles per hour and I'm here dealing with the blizzard, those days I need extra coffee.
Extra coffee, for sure. When we learned that you have that station in Maine that you do all the weather, it just blows my mind. And we vacationed in Maine last year, so I kind of checked out the news, and I just think it's so cool.
Oh, I get it all the time where people are watch like, oh, did we just see you in Maine? They're vacationing there too, just like that. And I'm like, yes, we do the weather for Maine as well. And they're just blown away, like just like you were, like, was that Geoff? What it was like. What? And it's funny because I go out there, 2-3 times a year to shoot promotions, with their teams. And I'll go out in public like I do here, and people know who I am there. And it's the strangest thing to me because I'm not there, but yet I'm there. And the newscasts there are very highly rated. Like it's the ABC and Fox affiliate. It's a lot of people watch, and it's just like, okay, this is fun, but this is a little bit strange.
A local celebrity in 2 different places.
2 different markets.
Love it. So, we kind of covered this question already, so I'm going to go on to our next one. I mean, there's been a changing landscape, obviously, locally, but in the news industry as well. Like, are there any specific challenges that come to your mind that you faced, and can you talk a little bit maybe about how you overcame them?
Yeah, so the news landscape is changing dramatically, right? People are going into camps, right? They're ideology camps, basically, which is scary because for many decades, the nightly news kind of covered that, right? ABC, CBS, and Fox nightly news kind of covered, the broad spectrum of news in America. Now it's much more you find your lane, and those lanes are usually by ideology, which is tough, right? Just because it's my mind is always open to change and always open to suggesting that something could be better. Some people are stuck in their lane and they just can't consider an opinion over here, right? And so a lot of times, we'll put out news and my phone will ring instantly of you didn't cover that correctly or you showed that person in a bad light. And usually it's a political ideology. And what really happens is, you know, politicians sometimes do bad things, right? Not always. A lot of it's good. A lot of policy is good. But in a political landscape right now that's very kind of in your lane, sometimes I feel that pressure to, not cave, but kind of just, we're right down the middle. Like the pressure for my team is right down the middle, good or bad, both sides, right? So we make mistakes at times. And there's been a couple where I'm trying to think of a time when in the past there was a story regarding the church, and it was a good story, a good church story, where we covered it, but in the background, a not so good video played of some, challenges the church has had in the past. In that moment, we accidentally pulled the wrong video. There's no malice there. It was just a mistake to put a not so great video in the background of a really good story.
Sure.
So I felt horrible because our really good story turned out to be, they were just horrified by it because of this bad video in the background. So, I did what I had to do to make that right. I went and met with the congregation, told them we were sorry. Things happened. There was no producer did this on purpose,
Right.
but I find myself having to, occasionally fix those kind of things where they kind of sneak up on you sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So the news gathering piece is actually kind of straight and narrow. The journalism is pretty defined. There's AP standards and we do that correctly. Where we kind of make mistakes sometimes is putting little things like that where this little video in the background was highly influential on how that story was heard and seen and received. So I find myself fixing those kind of things. That's a daily challenge. I told you about being shallow. Like I want the stories to go into depth, right? At the same time, our newscasts are only 30 minutes. Of that 30 minutes, 22 minutes is showtime, right? Of that, 3 minutes are sports, 3 minutes are weather, or 4 minutes, right? So there's not a lot of time to tell the story in depth sometimes.
Yeah.
So I challenge my team to do series, right? To tell the story over a couple of days. It's because if that's what that story demands, then you do it that way.
Yeah.
And I keep us staffed to a point that we're allowed to do that. Additionally, too, I think I told you earlier that, we're owned by one guy, and he has owned us for a long time. So I have never felt the pressure of a corporate kind of hand coming down on me to say, cover this way, right?
Sure.
It's never happened in my world. If anything, he's just super complimentary of how we handle and how we manage stories and how we kind of line the shows up with the really good stuff in there, followed by there's a spot for the bad stuff, right? But overall, that's a big challenge for me in terms of the depth of where we go with stuff, covering, making sure little, things that aren't a big deal on the surface to us, but like the example, the proper video in the background, don't sneak through and ruin the story, right? And then it's just the team. I feel that pressure where I hire a team generally right out of college, right? They're very green. And then the pressure is there to and the joy, by the way, of developing them in a way that sets off their career on the right path. Like I always tell them, like, I will never put you on air until you're ready, because once you're on air, you can't go back,
Right?
right? You can't go back. You have begun to make a name for yourself, and you've begun to make a resume reel that will take you through the rest of your life.
Yeah.
That video never goes away, right? So that's just the state of what video is these days, right? It'll always come back around. Somebody will find it somewhere. So it's important for me to develop a team that, loves the Northwoods, right? A lot of my questions when I'm interviewing people are not about the journalism. I know you have that because you're graduating with a degree in journalism or communications. You got that. It's about the Northwoods. Have you heard of Rhinelander? Do you like the outdoors? Do you like working in small towns? Do you like telling fun stories, great stories?
Yeah.
And those, wherever those answers go, are the kind of where I veer off, right? Versus the strict kind of journalistic standards thing that a lot of big cities look for. I can help develop that with my team over time. I want you to feel comfortable living here first, and then everything else will kind of follow.
I think a lot of businesses echo that similar feeling. They want to find people that are good fits for the community, and that they enjoy being here. The longer or the more you enjoy being in a place, the longer you're going to stay. It's important.
And that's what my joy comes through. My team, about 80% of them have asked to renew their contracts. So generally when I hire someone, we're on a 2-year contract. That's kind of normal in journalism. Sometimes it's 3 years, right? And so once my initial hires kind of came around, they're all like, well, we like it here, But I went through a phase where I think a lot of businesses felt this. Our wages weren't at a place where I could be competitive. They weren't there. So I had to go to Joe, our owner, and be like, Joe, this is where we're at. I'm competing with a class of graduates who are looking at me in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, or they're looking at Jacksonville, Florida, where they can make X dollars, twice as much could make here. Why would they come here, right? And, because, you gotta make a living too. So those talks, they went on for a while. This is right around pre-COVID where we started seeing that pressure of, this is different. Like, new hires aren't just looking for their first job to get their foot in the door. They're actually looking for a competitive salary on day one, right? And if we don't adjust to this, we're going to lose. We're going to not have team members, and thus we're not going to have a station, right? So that was cyclical. So my boss ended up kind of almost doubling our wages over 3 years, starting wages, which was huge, that he went there and said, go for it. Because he recognized that was a need. The other part to that was the housing, right? And I know you're front and center on this as well. There were a couple years there where I would hire somebody, but literally spend a month trying to find them an apartment. And it was torture, right? So I ended up developing relationships with, different realtors, different property managers, all this, because, hey guys, I'm hiring this professional person. They'll be here for 2 years. I can vouch for them. Please say yes, right? But if they didn't have that, there were a lot of companies who weren't hiring, or hiring and then people couldn't find housing and then declining the offer and moving away. So that is, I experienced our housing issues in the Northwoods front and center for about 3 years there, because it was a deal breaker if I couldn't find them housing, right? And there just wasn't housing to house them in. So that's changed now. Things have become a little bit more easier to find housing, especially 1 and 2 bedroom housing apartments. But the ongoing crisis is still there with housing the Northwoods. And I would use that word crisis because there are still companies that are turning away people, or people they could hire, not growing because we can't find them housing.
Very, very true.
I felt that on, right?
Yes. So we've talked a little bit about, successes and challenges, and let's future think a little bit. How do you see you or WJFW, or maybe both, evolving into the future? What's next?
What is next? Next is is staffing. It's finding the right people to take this company forward, right? That's always, your people are your first main priority. 2 is, what direction do we want to take the newscasts, right? So I think in a lot of ways that the the journey of broadcast journalism is changing, like we said, drastically. People are getting their news in snippets these days versus finding the time to sit down and watch a half-hour program. So how do I keep my half-hour program, and I have 5 a day, a 2-hour morning show up north at 4, and then Newswatch 12 at 5, 6, and 10.
Yeah.
So there's 5 live newscasts a day. How do I keep them relevant to where people tune in to learn something they don't know? Well, the number one driver why people watch local news is weather, right? So I'm constantly having talks with my weather team about, now that we have the public's attention, what do we have to say? For example, talking with Devin yesterday, right? So Devin, what did we tell our audience today that they can take to the diner tomorrow and be like, hey, did you hear Devin said this yesterday about the weather? Because everybody is interested in the weather, right? And people like to know interesting weather snippets about the weather, right? But things like that keep us relevant, right? Not just going through the motions of here's the forecast today, but saying things and doing the research on things to get it out there of what is interesting about the weather today. How does this relate to 10 years ago? So that's the weather piece of it. The journalism piece of it, I think, will grow naturally, organically, just because we are dead focused on covering the Northwoods, and we're dead focused on covering great people doing great things in the Northwoods. I think naturally people will tune into that. Now, do I feel the pressure of, I think it's natural for humans to be interested in the bad news, right? When we post stories on our website and on our socials of bad news, it tends to get the most clicks and views. People naturally, I don't get it sometimes, where they like to see others in a not so great situation.
Yeah.
And I get it, but I think in the long term, sticking with the great stories of the Northwoods is going to make us grow. Now, through the years, we have talked about, and it's been in my lap of, do you want to expand? Do you want to add a team to, say, Wausau? What would that look like? What would the budget be needed? Would it increase ratings? What would this do and to help our products? And our newscasts are our products because we sell them to make advertising dollars, right? And the idea of opening a bureau or having a team in Wausau, we've shot down only because we think it would take away from the Northwoods, right? Because like I said earlier, there's only so much time in a newscast.
Yeah.
If I have a team focusing on Wausau, Stevens Point, Marshfield, that area, it'll take something away from the Anago, the Eagle River, the Minocqua, the Rhinelander, Tomahawk. So I don't want to do that. So, which is why we focus largely on the Northwoods, right? And then when stories are relevant, we absolutely cover Wausau, Stevens Point, Marshfield, even down to Apaka, right? But we focus on our core 6 counties. So I don't think that'll ever change as long as our focus doesn't change away from the people, covering the people in this community. And I see our ratings, they're fine. And I think people take that in. So yeah, that's how I think we're going to go, by kind of keeping it in our lane of, yes, we're broadcast TV. There's a place for the bad stuff, but I'd rather focus on the good stuff.
Cool. Very cool. Okay. I think I only have one more question. Kind of on the fly.
Okay.
Just very random. If you could trade jobs with anyone in Rhinelander for the day, who would you trade jobs with and why?
Okay. So
super on the spot now.
This one is kind of an easy one for me, only because my second love is aviation. So Mr. Matthew Leitner, director of the airport in Rhinelander, I think he's got a cool job. I think he has a cool job. I'm a CFI, or I'm a pilot. I teach aviation. There was back in 2008, I kind of took a year off work and got all my pilot certifications. So I thought for a while I could balance teaching aviation along with a job in meteorology. I quickly learned that there are only 24 hours in the day, right? So one of those had to give. The teaching aviation piece has taken a step back a bit, although I have done some work with Nicolay College as they develop their program in aviation. I enjoy working with Kurt Drum over there on that. But Matthew Leitner, I think, would be the person I would want to directly for a day switch places with, drive the truck down the runway, look at all the loads on the for United and for Delta, and just kind of be I don't know, in that world of aviation full time for a day. So that's an easy answer for me.
That's super fun. I should have known that.
It's my second love. It really is. If I wasn't doing this, I bet you I would be probably a pilot for Delta right now, just because that world is fun, right? It's demanding, but it's fun and it's interesting to me. But my real love though is teaching. My dad was a teacher and a principal, a sixth grade teacher, by the way, which I don't know how he did that for so many years, and a principal. And so I feel like I'm on something like 280 school talks in the last 5 years. So sharing my knowledge in schools across Northwoods has been my thing. It really is my thing. And I hardly ever say no, just because I see the kids' eyes light up when I walk in the room. Here's somebody they see on TV every day. And oh, by the way, I can teach them meteorology and it's fun, right? So as they're kind of shaping their opinions of what the world is and what they want to go into, sciences or meteorology, whatever, I have an impact on that, and I know that. So teaching aviation and meteorology is probably my first love, in terms of the teaching piece of it. But if I could switch jobs for a day, Mr. Leitner, look out.
I love that.
Although, could you see Matt on TV? I don't know if Matt would do.
I don't know about that.
He'd be good.
Yeah. That's interesting to learn about, your background. Both of my parents were in public education or are in public education. And so, I see that value of teaching, and that's a part of the reason why we do like the Leadership Oneida County class here and everything like that. And so very cool.
Yeah, I feel a responsibility to kind of continue that legacy, right? And because when you're not teaching, what are you doing? It's kind of like the day just becomes reciprocal and over and over and over again. So there is nothing more fun for me when I have a new group of reporters or meteorologists that come in and spending weeks and weeks and weeks kind of sharing my knowledge. Through the years, I have found out that unfortunately, there's a lot of people who don't like to share their knowledge out there just because they feel like that's competition. Why would I, share that with you? Because then you could be better than me. Like there's a weird thing that goes on there with sharing knowledge. I've never had that, right? I feel like, if I have it in here and you can learn something from me, great. Or through my life experiences or what I've gone through, I will gladly share that with you. And I do look back now, as I've been here for 10 years in November. I have had a lot of experiences, right? I've also been, and I feel this, and I know this, wildly accepted by this community in a way where, I get requests to do school talks weekly. I get requests to do speaking engagements weekly. I get, I've firmly kind of put my thumb on what this community is. I feel like I got it, and I also know what I want it to be, and that is the same mission you're on with the chamber. We're very aligned in terms of, where is this going, right? What do we want the feel of this community to be, and then how do we get there, with the occasional hiccup, right? Because sometimes dealing with adversity is kind of part of the fun. And I get that every day through my work. But I feel like I know where it's going, and let's keep the Northwoods this humble, this place you can learn, this place where you can enjoy the environment, and also be a part of a community that embraces everybody. I think we're there. We're there, or really close to it.
Yeah, I would agree. And the concept of like rising tides rise all ships. You got to work collaboratively with people and recognize the diverse backgrounds and people we have in our community. So
yeah, a lot of that on weather too. It's different because through college, they always say dumb it down when you're on TV. Dumb it down. I hear that term all the time going through college. For the average viewer doesn't understand complex meteorology terms. I disagree. I disagree. I think if they want to understand complex meteorology terms, they'll understand them, right? So I've never taken that advice of dumb it down, right? I've always kind of just kind of put the information out there, explained it when I needed to, right? But at the end of the day, it's kind of fun to share the not so well seen side of meteorology, the science of how we got to a forecast.
Yeah.
It's fun to share that.
Yeah.
And be a little bit nerdy and geek out a little bit because people think like that too. So again, it's all the piece of, I think the normal person can handle not being talked down to, right? Not dumbing things down, because who wants that? I never understood when I was taught that in college of, dumb it down. What's that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else? We're having, a real conversation. And
We are.
I really appreciate that you've taken the time to come and talk with us and speak authentically with us about, you and your role in the community. And is there anything else you'd like to share?
No, I just think, you, Lauren, you absolutely you're on the right path with this, right? And not just with this, with your office, where you're taking the chamber, how you're embracing businesses, how you've gauged the pulse of this community, and you got it, right? While at the same time, you have a great board with you, kind of supporting you. Your team here is fantastic. It's a business supporting venture that you're on, while understanding you also have taken it a step further into community building, right? Yeah. That's a step. It's one giant leap, right? To balance those two things effectively, take on that responsibility. You've done it and done it well. So I was very happy to say yes to you today for this, podcast, the first one. And it's interesting for me and fun for me to kind of share my story as well, because I feel others can learn that, I always knew from day one what I wanted to do professionally. And then I got sidetracked. Yeah. But then I always knew that, hey, I need to get back there. Money always isn't the motivator. Step away from that. And then, down the road now, the money is back, doing what I love in a part of the world I adore. And then all is good. All is good. It comes around full circle.
Yeah. I love that so much. Thank you so much for speaking on our podcast today. So thank you all for tuning in. Our podcast, our goal is to release one monthly. And I'm, again, so grateful that you joined us for our first inaugural Real Rhinelander podcast. So tune in next month. And thank you so much, Geoff.
Thank you.